Well, thanks everybody for coming today. I was just joking with Annie here that I felt impressive that I look comfortable with this. Just because I'm not. But it's a testament to my stoicness, I suppose. I look comfortable, so it's a good disguise. My name is Whitney Fear. I'm a member of the Oglala Sioux tribe. I grew up on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. I moved to this area in 2005 and lived here since. So that's how we're going to start today's discussion, is kind of talking about our journey into this community, how we got here. I left the reservation because I felt like I was drowning in waves of grief and sadness all the time. I was drinking a lot on a regular basis to deal with that, because it was just always this constant. And there's not many resources where I come from, because everybody is kind of in that constant state of grief and mourning all the time. And because of things like boarding school and alcoholism and other things that contribute to generational trauma, our parents and grandparents, aunts, uncles, older people in our life aren't always able or equipped to provide that emotional support that young people need. So I felt like I needed to go away from there in order for me to continue on a trajectory which I was trying to go on, that was an improvement at the end of my high school career, because 2 years before that it was markedly worse. I was failing out of high school. I had like a .25 GPA. I was hardly ever in school. So the fact that I graduated high school was actually a pretty big deal. And I wanted to continue on that, and I knew that I was just kind of getting caught up in the same stuff, so I needed to leave. And so I basically obviously didn't think I had a ton of career prospects or academic prospects, given my high school GPA was full. But actually NDSU agreed to accept me on academic probation here. And I didn't finish my degree here. I ended up pursuing nursing, and I went kind of a long way of all things as a CNA and as an RN. I have my bachelor's degree, and now this last fall I graduated with my master's degree, and I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner now. Because I really truly have always wanted to try to offer the services that I probably could have used, that I have used, because definitely part of getting from point A to point B from when I first moved here until now wasn't just kind of something that happened. I went to individual therapy myself for almost a year, and spent a lot of time working on things that had happened, and navigating through that, learning how to have healthy relationships with family members and friends back home, and deal with the grief I was kind of holding on to. And so I had this, but I didn't want to do it like, I guess, in the traditional sense of psychiatry or psychology, which is usually like an older, super wealthy white guy that kind of asks you like how you feel about your mom and whatever Freud kind of stuff. I just wanted to be able to like visit with people, have conversations, meet them where they're at, not be so uptight and structured and regimented, and for certainly not so serious, because Native people are not known for being super serious people. We have a great sense of humor. I think it's a huge strength, but in psychiatry and psychology, humor is often interpreted as deflecting or distracting from an emotion that you perceive to be negative and don't want to experience. But it's really, I think it's so important for healing and who we are as people. So, but I thought that's probably never going to happen, something like that. So whatever, I thought that I was probably just pretty fortunate to have a bachelor's degree. And then the facility I was working at, Family Healthcare, offered me the opportunity to work for them and design my practice the way that I would want to have it. And they would support me while I went to school if I continued to work there after school. So they kept up their end of the deal, and they have essentially let me have free reign of designing my practice. I see patients how I want to see them. If that means like even going out to the car they're parked in the parking lot to talk to them, they trust me and they go with it, and I think it's awesome. So I'm really thankful to them, and that's what I'm doing in my current role is then a clinician, and then I'm also the lead for our very new behavioral health program at Family Healthcare.
Anin Buju, Nin Annie Indigenakas, Galaba Veganica, and Dujaba Ajijakanure. My name is Annie. So my family's from White Earth. I grew up on the Fond du Lac Reservation. We lived there until I was 13, and then my family moved to a town about 30 minutes from the reservation, and it was a very white town. So I had a lot of really interesting experiences there because when I was growing up until the point I was 13, everyone around me was brown, or most people around me were brown, and then I moved to a new setting where people had expressed never having seen a Native person before. Didn't really understand what it meant to be Native, so I got a lot of questions of like, what are you? What are you? Which I think is actually kind of defined who I am as a human being because, well, I am a human being. I currently work, I'm going to have a circular storytelling time because that's just how things go. So I currently work as an anti-human trafficking regional navigator for an organization called Simply Safe, which is out of West Central Minnesota. So what I do is training and technical assistance for community members, for service providers. I go into schools, talk to people about what human trafficking is. And in the state of Minnesota, we specifically focus on sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. There are organizations that do work with people who experience labor trafficking, but my organization is not one of them. Prior to this position, I did similar work in eastern North Dakota and also northeastern Minnesota. So I've been doing anti-trafficking work for about 4 years. And prior to that, I did tribal child welfare. Why I came to this community was that there were a lot of services available for my family that we were not able to access where we were living. And I thought that this would be a great place kind of to feel, what's the right word? A larger community. I wanted to live in a larger area, but I also wanted to have access to smaller town things. So it's just like a perfect match of like, it's going to take me 20 minutes to drive from one end of town to the other, but I can still do all the things that I want. If I want to go out and eat pho, I can go out and eat pho. If I want to stay home, that's fine. So another one of the things that I'm currently doing is I am enrolled in the National Human Trafficking Leadership Academy, and it is federally funded through the Office of Trafficking in Persons, through the Administration of Native Americans, the Center for Native American Youth, and Department of Human Services. And myself and 11 other Native people from across the United States and Alaska and Hawaii are talking about how culture can be used as a protective factor against human trafficking of Native youth. It's been a really interesting experience, and I think there's been a lot of emotional and professional growth for me throughout this experience, and also helped me see how things that I went through as a youth I really lucked out. So my own experiences with historical trauma, my own experiences with racism living in a small white town, and then where I went to college, all of the things that I went through, very similar to the story to Whitney. Went to the University of Minnesota Morris because I had free tuition as a Native American, which was really cool. And it wasn't very far from home. And when I lived at home, I experienced a lot of, like I said, a lot of things due to racism, and I didn't really heal from them. I utilized the coping skills that I saw around me. And those coping skills were humor, yes, but also substance abuse. and avoidance, because that was what we were taught, is that not to talk about the things that had happened to us, not to acknowledge that they'd happened to us, and to pretend that they weren't there. And as I was in college and I was learning more about my community, learning more about what it meant to be a Native American, all of those traumas bubbled to the surface, and so I dropped out of college. And then I started using heavy drugs. I went back to college and I got kicked out of college, which I really like to tell people, because like now where I'm at today, like you could not tell me looking at me that I was a methamphetamine addict, but I was. So I got sober, I moved home, got clean off of drugs, and over the course of a year I was working at a Subway, and I had graduated with like a 4.0 from high school. I did really well, and I was like, okay, so now I'm like a little bit older, and everyone that I'm working with is 15, 16 years old. This is probably not the best fit for me. So I went back to school, and I actually had to appeal to the dean's office for them to accept me, because I was kicked out because I wasn't attending classes. I was getting really poor grades, and I was receiving, obviously, financial assistance. So they're like, well, we're not going to give you money if you're not going to come to class. And so then I had to say, this is what I've been through. These are the things that I've experienced, and this is why I deserve a third chance. So at that point, I knew, just based on my own experiences, that I really wanted to work with Native Americans. I really wanted to work with families, because I knew how systems had impacted us, and how systems continue to impact Native families, and I wanted to somehow insert myself into that. And I wasn't really sure what that was going to look like, so my path even to this current position has been really winding and circular. But what I'm doing now is because I recognize that systems exist that have negatively impacted people, and those negative impacts have caused some people to be at higher representation in human trafficking. So my own experiences of friends and family members, experiences of people that I worked with, led me to see that, okay, so things are kind of broken, maybe I should try to fix them. And now I'm in a kind of a current role where I can do systems advocacy, talk to people about like the things that are happening, talk about my own experiences and how they all tie in together to lead me here. So.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lyndon Pease. I grew up on the Crow Reservation in Montana, and as I look over to Whitney, just making sure we're cool. Okay, so for those that don't know, similar to like worldwide countries and things, there are tribes that are historical, not friends, maybe even considered enemies. And Whitney's tribe, the Ogallala Sioux, is probably one of our nemesis for many, many years, way back when. But a lot of those times have passed now, and I actually play a lot of basketball with a lot of guys from down in the Pine Ridge area and all over from South Dakota. So just want to clear the air there so she's not giving me the glaring eye, because it'd probably be like a kind of like a Packers Vikings thing, or that school up north, and then NDSU, or Moorhead Concordia type of thing where you kind of got that rivalry. But in the end, we're all people. We all come from the same creator, and so with that, I hope we have some respect for each other today. Okay. Like I mentioned, my name's Lyndon. I grew up in Montana. I played a lot of basketball. I ran cross country in high school. Track and field is kind of one of my big deals. And so sports was kind of always a big thing, and that kind of led me to where I'm at in my career. Growing up in Montana, I grew up in a single parent household. I grew up with my dad, which typically is probably opposite of a lot of Indian communities, where either they're probably growing up with their mom or they're growing up with one of their grandparents. I actually grew up with my dad, and my mom bounced around. She was still in my life, but I was just primarily with my dad. Like I mentioned, I am enrolled in the Crow tribe, and what kind of makes me unique, and I've kind of explained this to others before, and working with Leanne and the Concordia panel, at her ethics class that she has over there at the university, I grew up almost kind of in between. My mom is a full-blood Crow, and my dad's essentially a little less than half. And so I've got some German blood and some Irish blood in me. And growing up, I didn't speak, and I still unfortunately don't speak my native language. That's always kind of been an impediment to who I am. So I think it's just awesome that when I hear Annie speak here, Ojibwe, I believe. I've got a real good buddy that lives in Mille Lacs, and he's a coordinator over there. And he's always on his Snapchat, and he's always going to classes and stuff. And I mean, it's just awesome. It's one of those things that you always kind of grow up and you always wish you would have won the $1 million lottery or something. I just wish I would have grown up in a household that would have spoke the native tongue. It's still one of my goals is to try to learn my language. With having a wife, 5 kids, coaching 2 basketball teams, and playing in 3 different basketball leagues. Having an engineering career, which I'll get to in a second, and then still trying to act like I can make the NBA, and I'm still playing on the Indian circuit. My language time learning is very limited, and I still do try to get some sleep here and there. But anyway, coming back to how I grew up, I kind of grew up I went to a Catholic school on a reservation from kindergarten through 6th grade. And what kind of made me unique, like I mentioned before, I wasn't a full-blood, I didn't speak Crow. So sometimes I was kind of treated, and I'm pretty light-skinned. And so I kind of seen from the other Indian kids when I grew up, it's somewhat kind of like they showed some bigotry towards me because I was part white. Sometimes they would tease me and things like that. And then here I am today. I fully represent who I am. I am Native American. I am proud of who I am. And so sometimes then in the white community, I'm put in situations where it goes the opposite, where now they're making fun of, and sometimes not knowingly, of my heritage. And so I've kind of seen both sides of the fence. And it puts me kind of somewhat in a unique situation. But in the end, I know who I am. I know that both my mom's side and my dad's side, and then how proud I am of where I've come from and who my people represent. That I just kind of shrug that stuff off. And you grow every year, just like you're in college. You go to class, you're learning physics, you're learning history, you're learning English. You go through life, and these two can attest to, you go through life lessons. Sometimes you learn things the hard way, sometimes things just seemingly line up and the stars align and things work out for you. So when I went to college, I was fortunate enough to play a couple of years of junior college basketball in Bismarck at Bismarck State College. And then I went down to Rapid City at the School of Mines, South Dakota School of Mines Technology. And I was supposed to play some hoops down there, and when I got down there, I ended up having my first kid and trying to do school and girlfriend and study at the same time in a community I was never there before, and it was tough, it was challenging. So luckily I had a scholarship, academic scholarship. It's the Bill Gates Millennium Scholarship, and I'm sure some of you have heard of it. So I was fortunate enough to say, all right, basketball. Kind of quickly realized I'm not going to make the NBA. I'm not going over to Europe and playing over there. And I'm going to buckle down, finish school here. And so that became my focus. And I got a bachelor's degree in civil engineering down there in School of Mines. And then after that, I knew I didn't want to quite start working yet. I didn't want to do the 8 to 5. I still enjoyed learning in college at that time. As you'll find out, that quickly fades away, and then you really start wanting to make money and not have to do homework and all that stuff. But started looking at schools, and I started looking at University of North Dakota and North Dakota State just for kind of a couple of different areas of my field, and then my fiance's field at the time. So we chose North Dakota State, and so that's how I ended up here. So I enrolled here in 2006 and graduated with a master's degree in civil engineering. So I am a proud Bison alum. I like to go to a lot of the football games. Been down to Frisco many times. was really cold this year, if anybody got to get down there. It was snowing in Dallas, Texas. But it's just not cool because we just left here and it was snowing. So circle all the way back around now. Like I said, I'm an NDSU alum. I got hired at my current company in West Fargo. And so what I do now is I'm a project manager for civil engineering projects. And essentially what that means is I manage, I help with clients, I oversee some design teams that do designs for different infrastructure projects. For example, one of the largest projects that I'm working on currently is the Fargo-Moorhead Diversion Project. And that's if you'll hear about it occasionally, it's been going on for, this project has been going on for about almost 12 years, 11 years now. And even before that, I was on a previous project with my current company that was just at the time looking at Fargo flood control. And now that this project is pretty large. The cost estimate is about $2.75 billion. It's going to protect quite a bit of the Fargo-Moorhead, West Fargo community. And it's still a work in progress, right? It's probably at least 6 to 10 years of construction estimated. And so it's one of those probably lifetime projects. So that's kind of where I'm at today. And I also do actually work out. I do work with other communities. I do work with some water resource districts, and I'm doing some work with the Amanda and Hidatsa, a Rickeraw Nation out west, and in Newtown we do some infrastructure projects out there. So travel out there and we do some work out in Fond du Lac. We got a manager down there that's got that book of work, and they've been doing some unique projects down there too, and we're trying to knock on the door in other communities and trying to not just help the area communities that are, the typical small town, big city, but also the Native American communities as well. So that's my story, and probably kick it around to the next one. So I don't know, Fanny or Whitney, if you want to take the next one. Sure, okay.
So this is my favorite thing about Indian country. The question is, what do you bring from your heritage to the workplace that may go unnoticed by colleagues? And something that I don't know that people that are not Native are not aware of is that like Indian country, while it expands across the United States, it's also like this big. So you can sit at a table with two people that you may or may not have ever met before, and you probably know at least one other person. And there's a connection, whether it be through shared trauma or through just cultural connections. So it's funny that you said that you know somebody from Mille Lacs, because I used to work in Mille Lacs, and I'm thinking I probably know who it is. And then I also know, and you might not know too, like somebody that Whitney knows, like just through the work that they do as Indigenous people, it's just like our world is so big and yet it's also so small. So that sense of shared community, I think, is really cool. It's one thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I actually, I had a patient as a nurse. Prior to being a psych NP at Family Health Care, I was the nursing unit manager for homeless health services. And one of my, I call my bros, that I got to know, he was telling me one time about how he was from Fort Peck, and he was telling me how he ended up somehow in Rapid City on some adventure, and then ended up in Wombly, which is like a hole-in-the-wall, super tiny reservation community on Pine Ridge. There's like, I don't know, probably 100 people that live there. And he was telling me about these two old guys that he was hanging out with at the time, and I'm like, oh my God. I said, were their names Willie and Sonny? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, holy shit, those are my great uncles. Like, what are you talking about? But I was like, that's so funny. Like, oh my gosh. He's like, I don't know. It's just so funny that by happenstance, I was like, because I thought as he's describing, I'm like, if there's anybody who would meet a random guy from Fort Peck just like wandering around Wombly lost, it would be my great uncles that would have met. They knew everything about the happenings around down there. So I think it's not so much a cultural aspect, I guess, for me, as much as an aspect of how it feels to have the experiences of people that people do when they're part of a disadvantaged population, and that's something that I struggle with a lot. That I really try to not go noticed by colleagues, but I definitely have people that I've gotten close to. I've shared more about that with, and that's just kind of looming imposter syndrome all the time, like really struggling to not hesitate to share opinions, or especially clinical opinions, things. When I was doing my clinicals for school, I had a great preceptor that challenged me a lot to, like, she would kind of nudge me or like kind of like kick my chair like that and be like, okay, and I would speak up. But yeah, it's just it feels really weird, and sometimes I still feel like, am I really like pulling up to a clinic where I work and I have an office, and this is just weird, so weird. It's like it's a weird environment. So, and I don't know if that ever goes away, if you feel more comfortable with it. I don't know, but it's definitely something I think is good for people in the professional workplace to be cognizant of, because it is really helpful when colleagues like seek that opinion or feedback, and that it's received well, so it's an encouragement to be more open.
Okay. Something too that I want to follow up with on what Whitney said too. So I've worked in social services all of my adult career, and sometimes I've worked within native social services, sometimes I've worked within non-native agencies. And working in non-native agencies has been more difficult for me because I find myself more aligned with the clients that we serve than with my coworkers. So a lot of times my coworkers have grown up in really privileged, wealthy families, really haven't experienced very many hardships. Not that nobody has experienced hardships, because everyone has, but my own experiences were more closely aligned with the people that we were serving than the people that were sitting at the table with me. And similar to Whitney, very much like that imposter syndrome, like, well, do I belong here? Or like, what's keeping me from being on the streets, and how come I'm so lucky to be sitting at this table and not struggling with the rest of my people? So that, I think a lot of people maybe don't see or feel.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I mean, I think Whitney probably said it best, or we're all connected. And even as I kind of reach out and look out over here, you know, Concordia, I know people at Concordia, obviously we know Leanne, and I think some of her students are here for extra credit, if I understand me right. So good bonus points. And so kind of small world out there. I've got one of my buddies I play ball with. He's actually one of the assistant coaches for the men's basketball team. And I see that the head coach just resigned, so kind of interesting to see if that individual is going to maybe put his name in the hat and then just kind of look around here and see a baseball player here. So he's probably familiar with the sports scene, and I know that sports program, all the sports are pretty tight. You know, smaller university like that, they're real tight, and they're all kind of family driven. And kind of see that a lot in Native American communities as well. When we're going out here and we're kind of telling these stories, we know, and after this I'm probably going to say, all right, do you know this person? Do you know this person? Do you know that person? Really? Oh, gross. And start talking like that. And so then you just start making those connections, and you just never know. You know, you spark up those conversations. You go to events like this, and you know, like I mentioned, I'm a pretty busy guy, but I like coming to things like this because I remember when I would go to these things and, all right, I'm going to pick up 10 extra points, so it's going to help my grade. I could use that towards the end of the semester just in case. But then at the same time, you're hearing other people's views on life. You might have grown up in a small town in North Dakota, or a small town in Minnesota, or a small town in South Dakota where 99% of the people were white. And so for us, when we were growing up, it was probably the opposite. It was 99% of the people were Indian, and then everybody kind of knew that white guy that lived over there, or that Hispanic guy that you kind of thought was Indian, but then it turns out he really was Hispanic, or the, whatever other race there was. And so you start to kind of become a melting pot once you get out of there, and then you start to see the world in a whole different place. And sometimes for community or for individuals, when you're exposed to a different community, sometimes it can be overwhelming. There's lots of temptations, just like in college. Some of you probably aren't even old enough to drink yet. I figured this out the other night, and I've got my oldest son, 17 years old. So like next year, he's going to be a senior in high school. And then I'm guessing that some of you are probably a freshman in college. And so then I started thinking, man, am I that old guy now? It felt like just 20 years ago, I was sitting in those seats and I thought I was cool and no cares in the world. And now it's kind of flipping back around, and now I'm kind of the older guy. My knees hurt, my back hurts, and I'm always kind of grumpy all the time and tired. But in the end, you expose yourself to different elements, and so I kind of commend those people that are here, because you don't probably have to be. You chose to come here and hear a different side of maybe some people that you would probably never expect to go up to and just start a conversation. But it can be as easy as if somebody's wearing a NDSU shirt and you see him in the mall or something, and you just say, hey, how's it going? Oh, NDSU, huh? Do you know this person? Well, you never know. You might know somebody, and then you start a friendship, or you start, somebody maybe gives you a job because of that. There's so many different opportunities that can open up because of who you know or where you've been from and things like that. So I'll probably switch gears a little bit here. And one of the things when you're working in the workplace, like I mentioned before, I am a project manager, and I handle a lot of different projects. And in the engineering industry, it's primarily non-native. And when I say non-native, it's primarily mostly white people. And on top of that, it's mostly just white males. I'm fortunate where I come from a local company that has about 5-6 different offices in Minnesota and North Dakota. And since I've been there, we've hired a lot more diversity, a lot more women, a lot more minorities, even international students, and everybody has their role. There's people that are good with clients. There's people that are just awesome with design. There's people that just can sit down and crunch on computer programs. And so one of the things that I feel like I bring to my company for my heritage is respect. When you're growing up in the Native American community, you're always taught to respect basically everyone. And whether it's your mom or your grandma or your grandpa or one of your aunties that probably just a little bit kind of a mean auntie, but you still really, really love her, she teaches you respect. And so that's one of the things that I feel like I bring when I go to my work is respect, because I do respect all my colleagues. Whether it's a drafter that's just now out of college, maybe he's 21 years old and hasn't had all the life experiences, but I'm going to give him the time of day to tell me what he thinks about a project, and then I'll kind of guide him. Or it's the opposite. I'm talking to a 40-year-old president, and then I become the listening, and I'm starting to absorb that. And so that's that respect and giving people the opportunity to voice their opinions, and then collaborate together and provide a good product for our clients. So I'll probably move that on, and I guess we're on that subject. What do you bring with the heritage to your workplace that colleagues might not notice?
So the next question we have is, what have you shared with colleagues about your heritage and worldview? So for me, this depends on the situation in the workplace, and I actually had a conversation with Leanne about this that may have spurred this whole date. And I may be incorrect, maybe I'm just being But we were talking one day, so I did work for a workplace one time in which I didn't feel safe, and that's something I think that also maybe that colleagues or workplace doesn't recognize too, so that what I choose to share and not share is based on behaviors of my colleagues. And so at least for me, it may be different for other people. As a woman, as a survivor of sexual violence, as a survivor of workplace sexual harassment, I am constantly, or have in the past been constantly kind of gauging my safety in a workplace. Emotional safety, can I talk about my personal experiences, can I talk about my background, can I talk about my opinions in a way that I know that I'm not going to be judged. And actually Whitney and I were talking about this too. So a lot of times, as I was a part of a conversation planning a Native-specific conference, and we were talking about having a survivor come and talk about their experience. And one of the people that were part of this planning committee was like, as Native women, every single one of us that comes to the table is coming to the table as a survivor. So just not always being safe to say that, whether it be for a larger audience or for the people that sit at the same table as you every day or in the same workspace as you. So depending on my space, I can share with people my background. Sometimes I can't. So. Sorry, just.
Yeah, so the question was, what have you shared with colleagues about your heritage and worldview? I kind of already laid somewhat of the foundation for where I work. And for the most part, it's predominantly a white male company. And so probably two different things here. First of which is sometimes people make these comments and unknowingly not knowing that might offend somebody else. You hear about this, whether it might be a racial slur or maybe towards somebody's sexuality, that can certainly apply to Native Americans as well. So one thing that was common at my workplace, and it wasn't intentional, I think it was just they had probably heard it from their parents or they heard it from someone else at work, and we have a lot of meetings at our work, and so we'll get a design team together, or maybe we'll have a surveyor, we'll have an engineer, and we'll have a drafter, and we'll get together and kind of lay out the design, what we got to do, here's a budget, here's a schedule, we got to get this done. And so sometimes people at work would say, we need to get together and have a powwow. And in their mind it was, hey, we need to get together, figure this stuff out, and it was no big deal. And like I mentioned, I'm proud of who I am. And I grew up dancing, and I still dance. And it's not just hip-hop dancing either, it's the Native American dance. And in most tribes, you have to go through a tradition, ceremony, to actually be able to dance. And so you might see it like on Dances with Wolves, something like that, where Lieutenant Dunbar is starting to dance, and he's worried that he's looking out, and, they kill the buffalo, and he doesn't know what to do, and then he starts dancing, and people kind of have that image where it's just people, just the Indians are just, kind of that kind of stuff, and there's so much more to a powwow. The way I'd probably kind of explain it to the non-natives is it's similar to like going to church. It's something it's sacred, it's tradition, and so I'll tell the story about how what the powwow basically means in my view. I grew up ever since I was a little kid. When you go through and you're learning to dance, you have to be guided through by one of your clan uncles. And when they go through, usually you're just a little kid, and it might be one of your aunts or one of your grandmas or something will make a lot of that beadwork for you. They'll make your cuffs, and somebody will make a roach, and you've got your Indian feathers. You've got your breastplate, and the breastplate kind of goes back to tradition where that it's kind of protecting you from the arrows from the enemy. You've got your bustle and your moccasins, and all that stuff is centuries and centuries of tradition that's been carried on through all of America with the Native American tribes. And so when I grew up, I went through that stuff. And we would go and we'd dance at New Year's celebration. We dance at every year we have a celebration for 4 days and then it ends with a ceremonial dance at Crow Fair. And so we all camp out, and we come home, and everybody stays in their teepees, and we dance. And so I remember growing up with my dad, and growing up with my grandpa, and all my brothers, and all my cousins, who I call my brothers, and all my aunts and sisters, and then we would dance. And there's times when you dance in terms of celebration. Back home, we've had some recent success with state championships, and when you have a celebratory moment, you give thanks. And so you hold a powwow, and it's just not to dance, but then it's to give away. It's to give away to your family, for all those clan uncles and clan aunts that have been praying for you. So then you'll return from your basketball games, or you return from your studies successfully, and then you give them some gifts. You give them some tobacco, or you give them some money, you give them some blankets. And so that's kind of what the powwow represents. And so when somebody at my work says, hey, let's get together and have a powwow, I know that what they really mean is they just wanted to get together, figure this meeting out. And it would happen a couple of times. And for the most part, it was just like, all right, shake it off, no big deal, I'm not trying to make a scene. And then there was one particular time, there were a big meeting, and there was another subject that brought it up. And I had to get it off my chest finally. I told a number of individuals, but here was all the management, all the project managers, our executive management, our HR, everybody was in the room. And I told them, kind of what I just said now, is the powwow is sacred. And sometimes when you make comments like that, and there's all kinds of other, bigotry, slurs, not just with race, but with sexuality and things like that really hurt people. And when I told this group of 30 people, it brought me to tears. It was something that at the time I didn't really realize it hurt me so much, but kind of felt like I was on an island by myself. And that was probably one of the first times that it seemed like, yeah, I am different. But I felt like it was an opportunity to explain to others that be respectful, and this is what it means. And I probably had 3 or 4 people come up to me after that. They felt so bad, because they knew that they were one of them that said it, and they just didn't know. And ever since then, one of those individuals has since adopted a Native American girl. When he would say it, he just didn't realize. And now he's given that little girl an opportunity to grow up and they're just a wonderful family. And so he would come and ask me, and he was going through the adoption process, and he was asking me, is there certain things I should be aware of? And I kind of talked to him, and he's like, should I go to some of these powwows and things and just become exposed, and so I get up under it? And I was like, absolutely, do that. And so then I'd start emailing him stuff he can go to. And so to me, it's just when you're around different people and you're in different situations, just kind of be cognizant that not everybody grew up like you did. And I'm always aware of that too. When I go to different places, I recognize that, hey, not everybody had the opportunities that I had. And that's why I talked about respect. I give other people the opportunity to voice their opinions, and I don't judge people just because I don't want to be judged like that, and I don't want to put myself in an awkward position. So that was one of the things that I felt real strong about having to share with my company, and ever since then, it felt like I kind of got like a big weight off my chest. And maybe I just clarified for a lot of other people that, yeah, I am Native American, and I'm proud of who I am, and this is why it's important to me.
So, yeah, I'll kind of springboard off of what Annie had shared about, it being real dependent on your comfort level. It's so great to hear that you sharing that with your coworkers went so well, because it's a huge risk to take to explain how you feel about something like that, because I'd say, that in some circles is the exception and not the rule. The rule is like, why are you so sensitive? Why are you like, come on, I was joking, whatever. It's a lot of like invalidation that people encounter, and then like that's humiliating for the person who has to, has kind of put it out there, and I can't ever like speak to how anybody that grew up on the reservation was raised, but I know like something that was, I think, kind of it's not a really long-term good survival tactic, but I know I grew up like people, around me telling you to put on your tough face, like don't let people see you cry, like don't, even when somebody hurts your feelings or pushes you down or something, don't cry, because then they'll know that they hurt you and they'll give them satisfaction. And so being vulnerable is really hard, because that means kind of this turning over the way that you feel, and it could like not go well. So yeah, I think sometimes I still protect that to some extent, and mostly the worldview part. Something I believe in pretty strongly is called the self-disclosure patients. I think it's really helpful for people, helpful with building rapport with people. And I know that works because like I don't know, I know that life, like how it is to not trust people in positions like medical providers. And if you, in that sense of being vulnerable, if you give them a little bit of something that they could, that they can kind of hold on to or kind of identify with, I think they feel more comfortable opening up. That's not always super largely accepted by the mental health community. There's still just a lot of conflict about whether that's okay or not. So yeah, it's risky to talk about that as a worldview, and it's hard to support things like that with science too, which is hard to talk with colleagues who very much your discipline is based in science and what's tangible, able to be proven, and I don't know, like the world as Indigenous people perceive it as not always tangible and able to be proven, and it just is something that you feel or know. So, and another thing is I'm sure that the scientific community would be largely unimpressed if you were like, well, my elders told me it was fine, that's a good idea. Well, in that case, but that, I think it's important to be authentic about who you are, and that's really missing from a lot of arenas like behavioral health, social services, as people are sort of this professional person, and their clientele has a hard time opening up or sharing because they feel like they're talking to kind of like that space on a person that may be able to empathize with them. And again, like they're fearing judgment from you, but I don't know, I think it goes, Annie was saying, like sometimes it's easier to identify with patients, and I think sometimes I'm like, I need to figure out like a scientific way to defend, like when patients are in my office for the first time and they, let a swear word fly and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, I say that word a lot more than you probably do. I grew up on a cattle ranch with cowboys, and my dad told me it was totally fine to refer to cattle as sons of bitches from the time I was probably 5 or 6 years old. So I've been shouting words like that my whole life, and totally fine. You can feel free to let that word and others like it fly as often as you would like. But yeah, so I don't know. It's just still, I guess, trying to, you know, feel out people and figure out where there's safe environments. And sometimes you have to take a big risk. Sometimes it doesn't go well. Sometimes it does. Been thinking about that when I was probably like 20. I was working as a CNA and I was working in the intensive care unit, and I really admired my coworkers. I was in LPN school. As they provided me with a lot of awesome opportunities. There's a few times that, you know, they got it arranged with like pathologists for me to go down and watch autopsies. I got to see a couple in-room procedures that were pretty awesome. And there's one night I came into work and my coworker, a nurse that I admired a lot and saw as a mentor, told me, "Your dad is in room whatever." And I'm like, okay. Like, does this person like look like my dad? I was trying to think of a time whenever like somebody would have seen my dad. My dad, very much a reservation cow rancher. Like, he's here for like 4 days and he's like, "I'm ready to go home. There's too many people here. Like, I gotta go home and watch Gunsmoke and be around cows." So, so I thought, like, what does that even mean? So I went to go look, and as I was walking in the room, she said he fell off his bar stool again. It was a native guy from White Earth who had a head injury. That's what he was there for. And I thought in that moment, like, Jesus, like, I'm a joke to you. Like, this guy's a joke to you. That's terrible. Like, this is someone's dad probably, or grandfather or uncle. Like, somebody, probably a lot of people love this person. He's a human being. Like, man, and like I said, I don't like to express emotion or be vulnerable. And I, like, legitimately, I'm not ashamed to say it like that, it moved me to tears. I had to like go cry it out because it was just such a huge realization of like, holy shit, I admire you so much and you think everything that I am is a huge joke, like I'm a punchline. It's just sucks that you're probably, even after I finished this degree, and if I finished another one and another one and another one, you would never probably ever see me as an equal, ever. Like, I would always be a punchline. And it's just terrible. So, yeah, it's a risk, and I think the more that people can really think about what they are saying and try to make it like a welcoming environment. I think like family health care is a great example of that. We have a ton of employees that are Muslim. We have a ton of employees that are Hindu. They don't eat meat. Or they're pescatarian, and every time we have something like potluck, there's never a shortage of vegetarian dishes, pork-free dishes, and they're made by people who are not of those backgrounds at all, because they want their coworkers to feel welcome. They want to feel like you can participate. Like, hey, you know what? I made vegetarian chili because I wanted to make sure that people from the Nepali interpreters or whatever, or so and so, felt like they could come to participate. So I think those things, they definitely feel like a very like supportive environment. Yeah, I'll start next.
This question, I actually don't have an answer for this question. So for both of you, what has surprised you about your work in this community with so many tribes and reservations around it?
So with that, we kind of talked from us three here, growing up on the reservation, and then coming out of the reservation, and then whether you're going to school or you start your career. So when I grew up in a small town initially, where I graduated high school was probably about half white and half Indian. And so the town was about 3,000 people, relatively small. We had a McDonald's. I remember when we got that was a pretty big deal. We used to have like Arby's in the town pump. Town pump's kind of like a Casey's around here in Montana. And so it just kind of, the reason I'm bringing that up is I grew up in a small town. but we could drive a half hour and then we could be like in a Fargo type of community called Billings, Montana. And there, you know, they have everything. They got the mall and the Targets and the Walmarts and at that time, Kmart's. So the one thing that I see interesting kind of growing up in my background is even when I'm working with clients, I may work with the City of Fargo clients and they have multi-million-dollar projects, or sometimes we can work with real small boards, and it might be in a small town that has 50 people in it, but they want to improve their life. Maybe they just have gravel roads. They don't have asphalt or concrete. Maybe they don't have a water tower. Maybe they're on a well system. And so to me, it kind of reminds me when I'm growing up, when you go to different reservations, you know, there's some reservations that have had more economic benefits that have helped them be more successful. And then there's other tribes and reservations that have suffered because they haven't been given those economic opportunities. And whether that's through forestry, it could be through like revenue from gambling. You know, there's all kinds of different revenue streams that come in through different reservations, and those vary by state. You know, it varies tremendously when you go from South Dakota even to Minnesota, and Minnesota to North Dakota, and so on and so on. And that's one thing that I've kind of started to realize is that's just not in Indian country either. That's in everyday America, in North Dakota. I can go to a small town and I drive down the street and this kind of reminds me of home. You know, that there's no curb and gutter. Everything's dirt, it's gravel roads, if that. There's mud all over the place. And to me, it's almost like, hey, this feels like home. And then you come into the city and then everything is paved, the streets are clear, you got water towers wherever you look, new developments, new houses being built. And so no matter where you go, you can kind of relate to some of that stuff. And so to me, that's kind of one of the things that surprised me a lot, even in this area with all the tribes around here. I can go down to Siston, or I can go over to White Earth, and I can go up north up to Spirit Lake and go all the way west towards Newtown. And each one of those communities are different. Just like the city of Fargo community is going to be different from the city of Valley City or the city of Rolla up north. You know, they're all unique. So that's one of the things that seems to me that is relatable. I can step into these people's shoes and I can step in over here and you relate to people. You know, not everybody's got the bright, shiny toy objects, or, you know, maybe they got this other stuff that they're happy with it. It gets them through just a different lifestyle. So that's kind of the same thing when I'm working with my clients is not everybody has to have the big and shiny thing. They get by with what they have, and that's the lifestyle that they choose to have, just like on the reservation. Not everybody has, they'll attest to it. You grow up in families where you got a one level, 2-bedroom home with probably 15 people there. There's probably like 4 different families. Grandma and grandpa, you got one of the sons, one of the daughters, maybe auntie that's living there, all in one household. And everybody, for the most part, gets along because they love each other. And so that's kind of one of the unique things where I go around these reservations around here, and it's just the same thing. I go to Mother's Day powwow up in White Earth, and it's just like, oh, it feels so good to be, it feels like you're home. You hear the drum, you see everybody dancing, it just feels good again. Just that taste of home. Then you come back to Fargo, it's like, all right, now we're back into our lives, kids go back to school, they ride the bus on Monday, or go do track or basketball or whatever it is. So you kind of treat yourself to all the best lifestyles that's in front of you. So that's one of the things that's always surprised me about the community around here with Fargo, Moorhead, and all the reservations around it. You can always find a little taste of home somewhere. So we're probably running towards the end of our questions here, I think. Leanne, I don't know if there was any anything else that maybe we wanted to talk about, or if there was anybody in the audience that had any particular questions that we could bounce off of. I'm sure once we start talking, that'll probably lead to some other things or some other stories or some other things that we've seen throughout our young lives. Yep.
So the title of the talk was about work and community, and I was wondering how you create a sense of community where you are now, and how you maintain ties to your home communities when you're away from them.
So to repeat the question, so the title of the panel today was Work and Community and a sense of community, and how do you tie that to your own upbringing and where you grew up on the reservation? So kind of.
Yeah, when you're away from your home community, how do you maintain that tie? And then how do you create communities that sustain you when you're away from your home community?
Yeah, I'll probably take it, and then I'm sure these two are probably going to have some, because it's a great question. How do you kind of keep your ties to your communities? To me, it's always, I know who I am. When I go home, I've got my wife, I've got my 5 kids, and I can lay there, I got pictures on the walls, I'll listen to my music, whether it's a good round dance song, or a good crow hop, or a good straight song or something, and these are all powwow songs. Or I'll listen to a Christian hymn that's sung in my language, or something like that, that kind of reminds me of who I am. Sometimes it's as simple as, and the Indians here will laugh, you go to Walmart and you see somebody and you know that they're Indians, and you kind of give them the nod, and they give you the nod, and it's like, all right, they're my people. Yeah. But what's really frustrating, and this is not racist at all, you do that to a Hispanic person, you go like that, and then they kind of look at you, like, oh, he's not Indian, all right. Then you kind of just keep walking on. But that's, you see the community all around you. That's what's nice about here, is because Sisseton's an hour drive, hour 15 minutes. White Earth is 45 minutes, hour. Spirit Lake's a couple of hours. And then there's obviously people that just live in the Fargo-Moorhead region. And I play basketball with people, I coach kids. You go to school events and you see Native Americans there, and so it's all around us. We don't always just have to go to the reservation. Shoot, the other day on Facebook, I watched a smoke signals clip about, if you haven't seen smoke signals, you got to jot it down for those people in the front right there. Smoke signals, it's really good. It's a comedy that was made in, I think, like the late 1990s, probably when we were in high school, or at least I was. But it talks about like the humor. And sometimes you just catch those clips and then it takes you back to where you were. And then you just laugh and laugh. And then you remember with all your friends in high school how you used to replay or kind of reenact those quotes and things, just like Dumb and Dumber, or some of the new stuff, I don't know, Hangover, and I don't know what the new movies are, but you relate to all that stuff. And so to me, that's how I keep my ties. And then of course just going home to family and visiting back on my reservation. We go back probably 2 or 3 times a year. One's Crow Fair all the time. And then usually we'll try to get in 1 or 2 hunting trips. So, like I mentioned, I go to White Earth and check out the powwow, and head down to Sisseton, check out their Veterans Day powwow usually, and things like that. And just remind us who we are.
I would echo all of that, and then just add to, so my professional role, requires a lot of traveling, so I do a lot of work across West Central Minnesota and across the state of Minnesota, and the state of Minnesota feels like home to me, but then I also do specific tribal work as well. So being able to work with tribal communities feels like home. And then not only that, but like with my fellowship. So we fly to San Francisco to do the fellowship work, and I'm sitting at the same table as like 2 friends from North Dakota, and the guy that I worked with and I'm really good friends with, who we worked together in Mille Lacs 10 years ago. So like, our community is where we are, and that feeling of togetherness is where we are. So that.
Same to all of that. I'll have to check out the Veterans Day powwow in Sisseton, because I went to their yearly one, and it's always like horrendously hot around that time. Yep, it's real hot, and they always just like always serve soup, a lot of soup, like no other options. And you'll eat it because you're hungry, but it's like it's really hot. Hot day for soup. I try to make it home as often as I can. It's quite a trek. I go a little over 500 miles down there. I like to make sure that my kids feel connected down there too, and that they know that they have a drastically different life than their cousins that are growing up there in the way that we grew up. I think, I know the first time that my husband went down there with me, I think it was quite a shock for him, how the environment, and for people who aren't familiar with the environment of the Pine Ridge Reservations, it's extremely impoverished reservation. I think the per capita income for a family of four is like $5,000 a year, like 95% unemployment rate. And there's a lot of reasons why that we don't have time to talk about. But anyway, when I go down there, though, I like my kids to definitely not be afraid, to feel comfortable when we're down there. My husband's acclimating to res dogs, which he has a hard time accepting that he's not going to run over them, and he is always like, "What do I do? They keep barking at the tire." I'm like, "Just keep driving. If you run over them, they'll reanimate and have a litter of puppies right afterward. They're going to be fine. Just keep going." He's like, "Well, why aren't these people holding on to their dogs?" I'm like, "It's probably not even their dog. It's probably a dog that followed them from the neighborhood over there." And now they're telling it, go on, like that, and it's going to just keep following them. Just kind of trying to teach them kind of funny stuff like that, I guess, and really good parts of that too. It's super, I feel like that to me is really special to me, that they have those relationships with our family there, which is pretty awesome. They have crazy old uncles like I do, which is great. I know probably one of my kids' things that they talk about probably every year, the first couple of thunderstorms that we have, is they used to be kind of scared of them, because they're different up here than they are back home. They're really intense. And I was down there we were down there and visiting, and my their grandpas, my uncles, were hanging out with them, and they were talking about how they were being scared. And my one uncle said, "Hey, get your ass over here. I want to tell you something." "You see them? You didn't tell them?" "Okay, we get the point now. That's enough of that, cousins." And so they were, on the back of a pickup, yelling at the sky and stuff. And they still do that, and it's so cute. It's pretty cool to see them tell that whole story. They remember it so well. That stuff is really special to me, for sure, that they have that good connection, and they have that respect. And we, as service providers for the homeless, usually there's a couple of events every year that are pretty cool. One that the Gladys Ray Shelter has every year called Wahoo Night, and that came about. There was a native guy that was homeless, Clem Brave Wool, that was around the area for a long time, and he was always telling the shelter director that they should have one night a year where everybody plays horseshoes outside and eats together and all that. And so they do that in his memory every year. And everybody, all the service providers bring their kids, which again, controversial. You don't have to be sober to stay at the Gladys Ray Shelter. But yeah, so it's fun. My kids definitely have asked me a few times if everybody has as many grandpas as they do, and why they only see their grandpas and grandmas sometimes, so the ones that are around there. But yeah, that's really cool too. I like that kind of stuff. That's how it is back home, just seamless. There's none of this like who's sober, who's in recovery, who's not. Like you are, and they're your family, and you love them, and you figure it out. So I like that.
We were doing a panels on the Dakota Wars, and I was the moderator, and LaDonna Allard was on the panel, and I said, look, I want to do this right. How should I refer to indigenous people? That's the term I use now. And she, if you know LaDonna, she's great. She basically said, just calm down. I'm Dakota. If you want to say Dakota, you could say American Indian. You could say Native American. But what she was doing was saying, why are you so nervous? And besides, when you're being so nervous and you're trying to do the right thing, you're othering me. You're because I now have to tell you it's okay. So I want to do the right thing, but at the same time, I'm doing it in probably the worst way possible. And that's why I want to thank Whitney for saying authentic. Is that something that you run into as well? Because you were talking about the just straight out ugliness. Is this a big problem as well when you're talking work community? That people are just so nervous that they can't be authentic with you.
I don't know if it so much can't be authentic, but I feel like that's when people say they have a fear of doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing, or hard to work with, that kind of stuff tends to snowball into and that's why we're not going to ask them to help us with this, because they're hard to work with, they can't get along, and then it really does lead to exclusion.
Yeah, actually, I got asked this question. We were at Leanne's class here about a couple of weeks ago, and it was their ethics class, and a young girl, probably 18 or something, and her classmate came up and asked me, how should I say it? It was the same thing. Should I be saying Native American? Should I be saying Indian? What is it? And to us, as long as you're not going to a derogatory term, like the Washington, the football team, we're okay with it. I prefer Native people. Indians fine with me. Warriors, things like that. You just start the dialogue. Just be comfortable is probably the biggest thing. Recognizing, we are indigenous. We are native to this land. There's all kinds of different terms that you can use, but just step beyond that formality and just dive into the conversation. Get beyond just the term. And if you're curious about, what was your struggle growing up on the reservation, ask that. What are the challenges you see today in Indian country that you think could help future generations, help with poverty, unemployment, healthcare? Just get above that initial, break the ice and have the conversation. So I agree with what she told you. Any other questions from the audience? I think they're good questions. Yeah.
So do you ever encounter social norms that would be decided to affect on your home communities versus dealing in business? I'll give you one example that I've seen is direct eye contact.
Sometimes it really depends on the generation, and it also depends on upbringing for eye contact, but I think one of the biggest things that I see as a huge difference is interrupting. And it just is so offensive to me, and super against at least my cultural upbringing. And it's very, very, very common in white society. And I'm always just like, stop talking over people. Like, what about your grandma? But that's a huge thing. I don't know if you have other things to add to that.
Yeah, I do. I think I brought that up just a little bit earlier. When we're growing up, your aunties or your uncles or whoever, you let the person speak and let them say what they're going to say, and then you speak. You do not interrupt. Even if what they're saying is wrong, you let them finish. And So speaking about, you get that a lot, especially in today's environment with social media. You get a lot of debates, we're obviously going through presidential debate, and so people are talking over each other all the time. Whereas today, it's almost just like, all right, here this person talks, then you go, and it kind of creates like a constructive dialogue. And that's that respect factor that we talk about. In Native American families, it's really driven home. And probably the number one is you respect your elders. And whether that's your parents, and probably even more so your grandparents, and all your clan uncles and your clan aunts, you respect them. And it might be to the point where you don't look them in the eye. There's some tribes where you can't talk to your sister-in-law, or you can't talk to your brother-in-law, because there's a tradition there that you can't step over those boundaries. And some people still do tie to those and hold themselves accountable to things like that. But it's probably one of those deals when you are talking to somebody, just give them the opportunity to let them provide or give their message, and then you can provide feedback after that. So I do like that question. It was good. Any other questions?
Well, I want to thank you for coming here and doing this for us. It's been hugely useful. And so I want folks in the audience to give our guests a round of applause for a great contribution. So thank you very much for your work.
Thanks for coming. We'll be around if other people have individual questions and feel like comfortable asking the big group.
So I have one other request. Lyndon, you have a story that I think is hugely powerful and important to you and to your people, and I was wondering, would you be willing to share that?
Yeah, I can. This is a story that in my culture, everybody knows this story. And I'm not going to say it right. There's probably different versions of it, but when Whitney was actually talking about the thunderstorm, thunderstorms play a huge role, just like anything with Earth in Native American communities. So with my tribe, we had one of our most respected chiefs. His name was Chief Pleniku. And the name itself, his name, it was given to him by someone, and it was Plenty Coup. And so to actually count coup on somebody is to earn victory. And so you can earn coup by touching an enemy, at least in my tribe. You can steal their horse, you can kill somebody, you can count coups. And so that's a victory. Like today it might be like a Medal of Honor, kind of an equivalent. And so that individual was really highly respected in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And the story goes back when he was younger. Him and his buddies, he was probably early teens, if that. They went on a vision quest. And sometimes in the white community, you might think we're going to go on a vision quest, and you might think that's kind of joking, but it's not. It was something that was kind of a passing through, kind of like a bar mitzvah might be, with the Jewish community, where when an individual, when the Indian went on a vision quest, they were trying to identify something that would maybe tell them what their future would bestow upon them. And so Chief Pleniku, he went on one of a rocky ridge in the mountains of Montana. It's where my people are from. And he sat there for days, and he wasn't drinking no water because he was trying to clear his mind. He was becoming just with the earth and the Creator. He wasn't eating. His friends would come and check on him, make sure he's okay. They had seen some visions, and he was getting frustrated. Chief Pleniku was getting frustrated. So finally, he woke up, and like I said, he was a little boy, and in this vision that he was having, an old man had come and picked up his hand, and he said, "Come with me." And he came off that mountain ridge and he came to a small home. They looked over the prairie, and boy, there was buffalo and there was elk, and you know, everything was plentiful. The people were happy, and at first he really wasn't understanding what was happening because he was just a little kid, and there's this older man who wasn't really saying nothing, and so one of the things that happened was there was this thunderstorm that came through. And that's why I kind of thought it was unique that Whitney brought that up, because my kids do, a couple of them have always kind of been scared of thunderstorms because they're really intense here. Similar. The thunderstorm came through, and that thunderstorm, when it came through, all the buffalo disappeared. They went into this hole, and they all just stampeded to this hole, and they went into that hole, and they were gone. And that thunderstorm rode through, and all the trees just got leveled. They all got leveled. And there was just one tree that was left, and there was a bird on there. It was a small yellow bird. It's called a chickadee. It was sitting there. and then out of that same hole, he was looking at that hole, and he really wasn't understanding what was going on. And before all those buffalo were there, they were all, before they went in that hole, they were all around him, and he was kind of scared because he's a young boy and all these buffalo were right there, and you could hear them groaning and moaning, and you could feel the fur right next to him, and then they just disappeared down in that hole. That thunderstorm came through and tore all the trees down, kind of devastated the land. There was no more creatures, and then kind of what came out about that is, out of that same hole, there started coming new creatures, but they weren't buffalo. They sound like buffalo. They mooed. Their tails were longer. They didn't have the fur no more. They had long horns. And so he looked up at the he looked up at the old man, and he asked the old man, "What does this mean?" And like I said, the old man didn't say nothing to him. And all those creatures started coming out, and they started filling the landscape where all those trees used to be. You know, it was completely different. Buffalo were gone, and these new creatures were there. And Plenty, he was really, really confused. He's, like I said, he's probably 11, 12 years old, and he went back into camp, and he went and told basically the council or his uncles and stuff, and they took him inside, and he told his story, and they prayed, and they passed the pipe and smoked the tobacco and prayed to the Creator. And they told Chief Plenty, they said, you had a really good vision here. This is a good vision. He said that all those buffalo that you've seen, that used to be our way of life. And when that thunderstorm came through, that represented the white man. He came through and he destroyed everything. And all those buffalo went into that hole. And out of that hole came different creatures. And those creatures, we've seen them. We've seen them coming off the boats in Billings. Those are cows. They're cattle. They're different. And he said, and that old man that was holding your hand at that house on the prairie there, that's you when you get older. You'll become an old man. You'll see a whole different lifestyle from where you're at now, from where you're going to be, but you're going to live to see all this. And so basically what they told him is you have to adapt to your surroundings in order for you to become successful and to live. And I reminded you that there was this one tree that was there, and it had a chickadee. And that chickadee, that bird, became Chief Plentycoo's medicine. And so he used that medicine bundle when he went into battles with the enemies. And so that was kind of his vision. And so he recognized that in order for the Crow people to be successful and to endure, you had to adapt to the lifestyle. And all those trees that broke, those were all the tribes that couldn't sustain, that they didn't want to, and they would be destroyed because that thunderstorm was just too powerful. it was just too much. And so in order for our people to come out on the other side, we had to adapt. And so that was his vision that he had.